I sat in the intensive care unit in a chair made of cold blue plastic. My hand was wrapped around my daughter's. Her name was Mia. She was 6 years old, and her hand felt impossibly small and cool inside mine. Her whole body was covered in a landscape of tubes and wires. A thin white blanket pulled up to her chest. A machine next to her bed breathed for her. The sound was a soft, rhythmic whoosh, a gentle puff of air that was supposed to be comforting, but only reminded me that her own lungs weren't working. The beeping was constant. A steady, low pulse from one machine. A higher, more urgent beep from another. I had learned the sounds in the last few hours. I knew which beep meant her heart was steady, and which one meant a nurse needed to come running. For now, they were steady. Steady and terrifying. Hours earlier, an SUV had blown through a red light. I remembered the color of it. Dark green. It was the last thing I saw before the world turned into a storm of shattering glass and screaming metal. We had been driving to the library. Mia was in the back seat singing a song about being a princess. Her voice a little off-key and completely perfect. Now she was here. My sunshine. My singer. My whole world. Lying still in a hospital bed with a bandage wrapped around her head. Her face was pale except for a dark purple bruise that bloomed across her left cheek. I traced the line of her eyebrow with my thumb, careful not to touch the bruise. I just wanted her to feel me here. I wanted my presence to somehow seep into her skin and tell her to fight. My body ached. I think I had broken ribs. A doctor had said something about a concussion, but I refused to leave her side. I couldn't. Every part of me was focused on the small, fragile rise and fall of her chest under that thin blanket. That's when my phone buzzed. It was on the small table next to my chair. Screen down. I almost ignored it. What could possibly matter? But a small, stupid part of me. The part that had been trained for 32 years to respond. Thought it might be family. Maybe it was my sister Jessica asking for an update. Maybe my dad was checking in. I picked it up. The screen glowed painfully bright in the dim light of the ICU room. It was a text message from my mom. My breath caught for a second. A flicker of hope. She was thinking of me. She was worried about Mia. Then I read the words, "Bring cupcakes for Chloe's class party tomorrow." I stared at the screen, my mind unable to connect the words to my reality. Cupcakes. Party. Tomorrow. It felt like a message from a different planet. A different life. Chloe was my niece. Jessica's daughter. Her birthday was this week. I was supposed to be making the cupcakes. I had promised. I must have misunderstood. Maybe she didn't know the severity of the accident. I had called my dad from the emergency room, my voice shaking so hard I could barely speak. I told him there had been a crash. I told him Mia was hurt badly. He must have told her. My fingers were clumsy as I tried to type a reply. Mia is in the ICU. But before I could send it, another message buzzed through. It was from Mom again. Don't ignore me. Sarah, you have a habit of making everything about you. You promised Chloe. The air left my lungs in a silent gasp. The plastic chair suddenly felt like it was miles below me, making everything about me. My daughter was hooked up to a ventilator, and my mother thought I was seeking attention. The cruelty of it was so sharp it felt like a physical blow. It was a clean, cold cut straight to the heart. Another buzz. This one was from a group chat. My dad's name popped up. My heart seized again. Praying he would be the voice of reason. Praying he would fix this. His message appeared under my mom's. Your mother is right. Your sister's kid matters. 2. Stop being so dramatic and answer her. You always ruin things with your drama. My sister's kid matters more than your tantrums. Ruin things. Drama. The words swam in front of my eyes. The beeping of the machine seemed to fade into a dull roar in my ears. I looked from the phone screen to my daughter's still face. Her small, perfect lips were slightly parted. A tube was taped to the corner of her mouth. I thought about all the times I had swallowed my feelings to keep the peace. All the times I had apologized when I wasn't wrong. All the times I had driven across town, baked the cupcakes, planned the parties, and babysat the kids, hoping that one day my efforts would be seen, that one day I would be seen. And in that sterile, quiet room, with the scent of antiseptic in the air and the life of my child hanging by a thread, I finally saw the truth. They would never see me. They couldn't. Because to them, I wasn't a person. I was a function, a tool. And right now, I was a broken one. That was the moment. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a scream. It was a quiet, cold snap deep inside my soul. The part of me that had spent a lifetime hoping for their love, their approval, their basic human decency finally went silent. It didn't die with a fight. It just let go. It broke. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that it would never, ever be put back together again. To understand that moment in the hospital, you have to understand my family. The Bennetts. On the outside, we looked perfect. We were the family in the Christmas cards, all smiling in matching sweaters. My mother made sure of it. Eleanor Bennett, my mother, was a master of appearances. Her home was immaculate. Her garden was flawless. And her emotions were always tucked away, hidden behind a polite, tight smile. She didn't raise children. She curated them. Everything was about how things looked to the neighbors, to her friends, to the world. Love wasn't a feeling in our house. It was a performance. And I was a terrible actor. My father, Robert Bennett, was her audience. He was a quiet man who learned early on that the easiest path through life was to agree with my mother. He wasn't cruel, not actively. He was just absent, a ghost at his own dinner table. When my mother would aim a sharp, critical comment my way, he would just stare down at his plate. His silence was a form of permission. He saw what was happening. He had to. But he chose peace over protection. He chose his wife over his daughter every single time. And then there was Jessica, my older sister. Jessica was born for the spotlight. She was the golden one. the one who could do no wrong. She was beautiful, charming, and knew exactly how to play my mother's game. When Jessica got a C on a report card, my mother would say the teacher was jealous of her. When I got a B, my mother would ask why it wasn't an A. When Jessica crashed her first car, my parents bought her a new one. When I got a flat tire, my dad told me to look up how to change it on the internet. Jessica learned to see me the way my mother saw me, as the help. As the one who existed to make her life easier. For my entire life, I was the fixer. It was my official, unspoken role. When my mother decided to host a last-minute dinner party for 20 people, I was the one who got the call to come chop vegetables and set the table. When Jessica needed a babysitter for Chloe so she could go out with her friends, she didn't ask. She just told me what time to be there. When my dad's car needed to go to the shop, I was the one who had to take a day off work to sit in the waiting room for him. I did it all. Every single time. I did it because I was chasing a ghost. I was chasing the idea that if I was helpful enough, if I was good enough, if I never said no, then one day they would turn to me and say, "Thank you, Sarah. We see you. We love you." I remember one Thanksgiving a few years ago. I spent 2 full days cooking. I made the turkey, the stuffing, the pies, everything. My mother had been complaining about how stressful the holidays were, so I told her I would handle it all. I wanted to give her that gift. When the guests arrived, friends of hers from the country club, they all complimented the food. I stood in the kitchen, my apron still on, and I heard my mother's clear, bright voice say, "Thank you so much. It's my grandmother's recipe." I was up all night cooking. She didn't even glance my way. Later, when I was washing the mountain of dishes, Jessica came in and dropped her plate in the sink. "You missed a spot on that fork," she said before walking out. I stood there, my hands in the greasy water, and just cried silently. I didn't want them to hear me. I didn't want to cause any drama. That was the pattern. My needs were always an inconvenience. My feelings were drama. My exhaustion was an excuse. I was the family's shock absorber. I was the one who was supposed to soak up all the tension, all the demands, all the coldness, and smile through it. I was expected to be endlessly available, but emotionally invisible. I spent years believing it was my fault. I thought if I just tried harder, found the right words, or did the right things, the dynamic would change. I would finally earn my place. I would finally matter. Sitting in that ICU, the phone heavy in my hand, I saw the truth. It was never about me trying harder. It was about them needing someone to be small so they could feel big. They needed a servant, not a daughter. They needed a fixer, not a family member. And as I looked at my own daughter, my beautiful, innocent Mia, lying broken in that bed because of a stranger's mistake, I realized the most dangerous people in her life weren't strangers at all. They were the ones who were supposed to love her most. The ones who, in the face of our greatest tragedy, were worried about Cupcakes. They hadn't just failed me. They were a threat to my child because they had trained me for my entire life to put their needs before my own. And if I wasn't careful, they would teach me to put their needs before hers too. It was supposed to be a simple drive. That's the part that haunts me. The sheer, boring normalcy of it all. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The sun was warm for an autumn day, spilling through the windshield and making dusty patterns in the air. We were going to the library for story time. Mia was in her booster seat in the back, singing along to a Taylor Swift song on the radio. She was in a phase where she made up her own words. The song was about heartbreak, but Mia's version was about a unicorn who lost its sparkly horn. She was singing at the top of her lungs, kicking her little legs in their pink sneakers against the back of my seat. I caught her eye in the rearview mirror, and she gave me a huge gap-toothed grin. My unicorn is sad. Mommy, she sang, her voice full of pretend drama. Oh no, I said, playing along. How will he get his sparkle back? He needs a magical cupcake, she declared. I laughed. Everything in her world could be fixed with a magical cupcake. For a moment, everything was perfect. The sound of her laughter, the warmth of the sun on my arm, the familiar streets of our town. It was just a simple, happy moment. The kind you don't even notice until it's gone forever. We were stopped at a red light 2 blocks from the library. I was humming along with the radio. I remember looking at the car next to us. A woman talking on her phone. I remember the crosswalk sign flashing its little white walking man. Everything was exactly as it should be. Then the light turned green. I took my foot off the brake and started to pull into the intersection. It was all in slow motion, yet it happened in less than a second. To my left, I saw a flash of dark green. A huge SUV, the kind with a grille that looks like angry teeth. It wasn't slowing down. It wasn't even trying to. It was a missile aimed directly at us. There was no time to scream. There was no time to think. My only instinct was to turn the wheel. A useless gesture to try to move Mia away from the impact. My body tensed. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Then the sound. It's a sound you can't describe. It's not just a crash. It's a violation. It's the sound of metal being torn apart like paper. It's the explosion of glass shattering into a million tiny diamonds. It's the violent, gut-wrenching thud of 2 tons of steel hitting 1 ton of steel. The world spun. My head slammed against the window. For a second, there was only a bright, searing white light and a roaring in my ears. The car was shoved sideways, scraping across the asphalt with a deafening screech. It felt like we were tumbling over and over, but we weren't. We were just spinning. Then, silence. A thick, heavy silence that was more terrifying than the noise. It lasted only a moment. Smoke filled the car, smelling of burnt plastic and something sweet. Like coolant. My ears were ringing. My vision was blurry. The world was tilted at a strange angle. The driver's side of the car was completely caved in. The door pressed hard against my body. Pain started to seep in. A sharp stabbing pain in my side. A dull, throbbing ache in my head. but none of it mattered. "Mia?" I choked out. My voice was a raw whisper. No answer. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through the fog in my brain. I couldn't turn around. My body was pinned. I reached my arm back, my fingers fumbling blindly for the back seat. "Mia. Baby. Can you hear me?" I sobbed, my voice cracking. "Say something. Please say something." My fingers brushed against her leg. It was still. I stretched further, my shoulder screaming in protest until my hand found hers. It was limp. So incredibly limp. That's when the siren started. Faint at first, then growing louder and louder. A wail that seemed to come from inside my own head. Flashing lights, red and blue, painted the inside of the car, making the smoke and dust dance. People were shouting outside. A face appeared in the shattered passenger side window. A man's mouth moving, but I couldn't hear the words. All I could feel was Mia's limp hand in mine. All I could see was her silence. They had to cut me out of the car. I remember the shriek of the jaws of life. The firefighters yelling instructions. I wouldn't let go of her hand. A paramedic leaned in and spoke to me, his voice calm and steady in the middle of the chaos. He told me they were getting her out. He told me she was breathing. I held on to those words. She's breathing. The rest is a blur. The ambulance ride. The hospital. Doctors and nurses swarming around us. Questions I couldn't answer. Papers I couldn't sign. And through it all, I kept asking the same thing over and over again to anyone who would listen. Is my daughter okay? Please. Is my daughter okay? And no one would give me a straight answer. They just looked at me with pity in their eyes. Now she was here in this quiet, dimly lit room, fighting for her life. And my family, my own mother and father, were asking for baked goods. They were taking that perfect, simple moment in the car, the sunlight, the laughter, the song about a unicorn, and they were trampling all over its memory with their selfish, thoughtless demands. They were trying to erase it, just like they had tried to erase me for my entire life. If this story touches you, please subscribe to the channel and share the video to help me grow and improve. I must have been sitting in that plastic chair for 5 hours straight. My body had gone numb. A nurse had tried to get me to go to the emergency room myself to get my ribs checked. But I refused. I couldn't leave Mia. What if she woke up and I wasn't there? The thought was unbearable. So I sat and I watched and I prayed. A young doctor with kind eyes and a tired face came in to check Mia's vitals. He gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. "We're monitoring the pressure in her brain," he said softly. "The next 24 hours are critical. You should try to get some rest." Rest felt like a betrayal. "How could I rest when she couldn't?" he continued. "I just spoke to the front desk. They said your mom is in the waiting area. Should I send her back?" My mom. She was here. For one stupid, hopeful second, my heart leaped. The texts. The cruelty. It must have been a mistake. A misunderstanding. My dad must have downplayed the accident and she didn't realize how bad it was. But now she was here. She had driven all the way to the hospital. She was here to be a mother. She would walk through that door, her face etched with worry, and she would wrap her arms around me, and we would face this together. She would hold my hand the way I was holding Mia's. Yes, I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. Please send her in. The doctor nodded and left, the door swinging shut with a soft whoosh. I braced myself. I tried to smooth my hair, which was matted with dried blood on one side. I wiped the tears from my face with the back of my hand. I wanted to look strong for her. I waited. Every second felt like an hour. I listened for her footsteps, for the sound of the door. Finally, it opened, and there she was. Eleanor Bennett. She stood in the doorway, her handbag perched perfectly in the crook of her arm. Her hair was immaculate, not a single silver strand out of place. She was wearing a crisp white blouse with a diamond brooch pinned to the collar, gleaming under the harsh hospital lights. Her face, her perfectly made-up face, showed no sign of distress, no worry, no fear. There wasn't a trace of emotion at all. She looked like she was stopping by after a luncheon at the country club. She didn't look at Mia. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the machines and the IV drips with a look of faint distaste, as if she had just walked into a dirty restaurant. Then her gaze landed on me, and her eyes narrowed. The first words out of her mouth were not, "How is she?" They were not, "How are you?" They were not, "I was so worried." Her voice was sharp, impatient. "Did you get my text?" The flicker of hope inside me died instantly, snuffed out by the cold wind of her words. I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, my mind reeling. She was standing 10 feet away from her critically injured grandchild, and she was talking about a text message about cupcakes. "Mom?" I finally managed to whisper. The word felt like ash in my mouth. "Mia's on life support." I said it quietly, hoping the words would shock her into reality, hoping they would crack through that polished exterior and find a grandmother. A mother somewhere inside. They didn't. Her lips thinned into a hard, flat line. "And your niece still needs her cupcakes for her party. It's her birthday. Don't be selfish and make this about you." Make this about you. The phrase echoed in my head. The same words from her text message, now delivered to my face. The absurdity of it was so profound I almost laughed. A wild, hysterical sound bubbled up in my throat, but I choked it down. Before I could even process her cruelty, another figure appeared in the doorway behind her. My sister Jessica. She was on her phone typing something with her thumb. She glanced up, saw me, and rolled her eyes. The gesture was so casual, so dismissive. It was like a slap in the face. "There you are," Jessica said, her tone dripping with annoyance. She finally looked over at Mia's bed. A brief, uninterested glance. "God. Sarah, you're overreacting. Kids get banged up all the time. She'll be fine. She turned her attention back to me. But Chloe's birthday is important. I told all the moms at her school that you were making your famous chocolate cupcakes. You can't back out now. It would be really embarrassing for me. Embarrassing for her. I looked from my sister's bored face to my mother's cold, impatient one. They weren't seeing the same room I was. They weren't seeing the ventilator, the monitors, the tube taped to my daughter's face. They weren't seeing a little girl fighting for her life. They were seeing an inconvenience, an obstacle. They were seeing their personal fixer, their family servant, failing at her duties, and it was annoying them. My tragedy was an item on their to-do list that was messing up their schedule. I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the calm of absolute certainty. The calm that comes after the last bit of hope has been extinguished. I finally understood. There was nothing I could do. Nothing I could say that would ever make them care. It wasn't possible. They were broken in a way I could never fix. I looked at my mother's diamond brooch. It caught the light and sent a tiny, sharp sparkle across the room. I thought about the years. All the years I had spent trying to earn a crumb of affection from this woman. The holidays I had ruined for myself by trying to make them perfect for her. The phone calls where I listened to her complain about Jessica for an hour, only to hear her praise Jessica to everyone else. The endless, thankless tasks I performed. Always hoping this time, would be the one that made her see me. I thought about my sister. I thought about the secrets I had kept for her, the money I had lent her, the times I had picked up her child from daycare because she forgot. All of it done in the name of being a good sister, a good aunt. All of it a waste. All of those years of quiet endurance, of biting my tongue, of swallowing my pain, came rushing up inside me. It was a tidal wave of resentment and hurt, and it was about to break. It all snapped in a single breath. My hands started to tremble, not from weakness, but from a surge of pure, cold rage I had never allowed myself to feel before. I slowly, deliberately stood up from the plastic chair. My legs were shaky, but I locked my knees. I felt taller. "You want cupcakes?" I said. My voice was low, quivering. It was a stranger's voice. "You are standing in the intensive care unit. You are looking at my daughter, your granddaughter, and you want me to go home and bake cupcakes?" My mother's face twisted into a mask of indignation. "Stop exaggerating. Sarah, nobody is asking you to do it this second. But you need to have a sense of responsibility to the rest of the family." Responsibility. The word came out louder now, sharper. The nurse at the station down the hall glanced in our direction. "You want to talk about responsibility? Well, my daughter's heart is being kept alive by machines." "There you go again," Jessica sighed, stepping forward. "So dramatic. This is why no one can ever talk to you. You always have to be the victim." The victim. That was it. That was the word that turned everything inside me from trembling rage to solid steel. For my entire life, they had painted me as the dramatic one, the overly sensitive one, the one who made things difficult. They had made me believe it myself. I spent my whole life apologizing for having feelings. Not anymore. I took a step toward them. My voice dropped again. But this time it didn't tremble. It was flat. It was dead. It was the voice of someone who had absolutely nothing left to lose. Get out. My mother blinked, genuinely shocked. What did you say? I said. Get out. I repeated. My eyes locked on hers. Get out of this room. You can't talk to me that way. She hissed, her face turning red. I am your mother. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. My mother is worried about cupcakes for a party. My mother is calling me selfish while my child might be dying. You are not my mother. You are just the woman who gave birth to me. I turned my gaze to Jessica, whose mouth was hanging open. And you? You are worried about being embarrassed. You should be. You should be embarrassed to be such a shallow, heartless human being. Chloe deserves a better mother than you. The shock on their faces was stunning. It was the look of someone who has kicked a dog every day of its life and is suddenly, inexplicably bitten. They were speechless. They had no script for this. The Sarah they knew didn't fight back. The Sarah they knew would have eventually caved, apologized, and promised to get the cupcakes done somehow. That Sarah was gone. She died the moment I read those text messages. I stood my ground, my entire body humming with a strange, powerful energy. I am done, I said, my voice ringing with a finality that echoed in the small, quiet room. I am not your servant. I am not your backup mother. I am not your emotional punching bag. I am Mia's mom. And from now on, she is the only one who matters. She comes first. Their faces were a mixture of disbelief and fury. But they didn't say another word. They just stared at me as if I were a stranger. And I suppose I was. I didn't wait for them to leave. I simply turned my back on them. I walked back to Mia's bedside, picked up her small, warm hand, and held it to my cheek. I didn't need to see them go. I could hear it. The sound of my mother's indignant scoff. The sound of Jessica whispering something venomous. And then the sound of their heels clicking angrily on the polished hospital tile as they walked away. That sound. The sound of them leaving my life. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It echoed in the hallway like freedom. After they were gone, the silence they left behind was vast and heavy. The air in the room, which had been crackling with their toxic energy, slowly settled. The only sounds were the steady, rhythmic puff of the ventilator and the soft electronic pulse of Mia's heart monitor. For a moment, I just stood there, my back to the door, my hand resting on my daughter's bed. The adrenaline that had flooded my body, giving me the strength to finally stand up to them, began to drain away, leaving me feeling hollowed out and shaky. I sank back into the cold plastic chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my bruised ribs. What did I just do? The question echoed in the new terrifying silence. For 32 years, I had navigated my life by a single unwavering rule: keep the peace. Don't make waves. Don't upset Mom. Don't disappoint Dad. Don't burden Jessica. My entire identity was built around their comfort and my compliance. And I had just set fire to all of it. That's when my phone, which I had dropped on the chair, began to buzz. And it didn't stop. It was a relentless, angry vibration against the plastic. One message after another, a machine gun burst of notifications. Each one a digital bullet aimed at the fragile new person I was trying to become. My hand trembled as I reached for it. I knew I shouldn't. I knew it would be poison. But a part of me, the part that was still their trained daughter, felt compelled to look. The screen was a wall of their rage. It started with my mother. How dare you speak to me that way? After everything I have done for you, you are an ungrateful, selfish child, and you have broken my heart. Another one followed instantly. Your father is devastated. You have finally pushed us away for good with your disgusting behavior. I hope you're happy being all alone. Then Jessica's texts began. They were crueler, sharper. You're a psycho. Seriously. Kicking us out when we came to support you? You're unbelievable. Have fun with your little drama scene. Don't call me when you need something ever again. Chloe is heartbroken that you're ruining her birthday. The words were designed to hit every insecurity I had. Ungrateful. Selfish. Alone. Psycho. Drama. They were the labels they had branded me with my entire life. And they were pressing them into my skin with all their might, trying to force me back into my box. Then came the message that truly broke me. It was from my father. My quiet, passive father who never took a side, whose silence had always been a quiet confirmation of my mother's cruelty. For the first time, he wasn't silent. He had picked up his phone and typed out the words himself. Sarah, your mother is in tears. You need to apologize for the things you said. This isn't like you. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. The right thing for him was for me to swallow my pain, ignore their heartlessness, and smooth things over for my mother. The right thing was to go back to being their servant. Even now, with his granddaughter on life support, his primary concern was his wife's feelings, not my pain, not Mia's life. I stared at his message, and the last stubborn thread of hope that he might one day stand up for me finally disintegrated. He wasn't a victim of my mother's personality. He was her partner in it. He was the one who held me down while she hit me. I looked at Mia. Her small face was so peaceful, so innocent. She was completely dependent on me. Not just for her physical survival in this hospital, but for her emotional survival in the world. What would happen to her if I let these people back into our lives? They would do to her what they had done to me. They would teach her that her feelings were an inconvenience. They would teach her that love was conditional. They would teach her to be small. A new kind of strength, cold and clear, washed over me. It wasn't the fiery rage from before. It was a quiet, unshakable resolve. Without hesitation, I opened my contacts. My thumb hovered over the first name, Eleanor Bennett. I could feel 32 years of conditioning screaming at me not to do it. She's your mother. You can't just cut her out. Families are forever. I thought of the cupcakes. I thought of the diamond brooch. I thought of the words, "Don't make this about you." I pressed the button, "Block this caller." A small confirmation popped up. I pressed block contact. Her name vanished from my recent texts, replaced by a generic number. It was like she had been erased. Next, I found my father, Robert Bennett. My hand hesitated for a second. He was my dad. He had taught me how to ride a bike. He had held my hand at the zoo. But that man was a ghost. The man who existed now was the one who told me to apologize for being hurt. I thought of his silence, the thousands of times he had looked away. I pressed block contact. Finally, Jessica, my golden sister, the one I had both admired and resented my whole life. I thought of her eye roll. I thought of her sigh of annoyance. I thought of the phrase, "Kids get banged up all the time." My thumb didn't even pause. Block contact. And then silence. The phone in my hand stopped buzzing. The screen went dark. The barrage was over. The silence that filled the room now was different. It wasn't empty or scary. It was calm. It was clean. It felt holy. I placed the phone face down on the table. I didn't need it anymore. There was no one I needed to hear from. The only person who mattered was in the bed in front of me. Tears finally started to stream down my face. But they weren't tears of sadness or anger. They were tears of relief. Of release. I felt like I had been carrying a 100 pounds weight. I thought of the diamond brooch. I thought of the words, "Don't make this about you." I pressed the button, "Block this caller." A small confirmation popped up. I pressed block contact. Her name vanished from my recent texts, replaced by a generic number. It was like she had been erased. Next, I found my father, Robert Bennett. My hand hesitated for a second. He was my dad. He had taught me how to ride a bike. He had held my hand at the zoo. But that man was a ghost. The man who existed now was the one who told me to apologize for being hurt. I thought of his silence, the thousands of times he had looked away. I pressed block contact. Finally, Jessica, my golden sister, the one I had both admired and resented my whole life. I thought of her eye roll. I thought of her sigh of annoyance. I thought of the phrase, "Kids get banged up all the time." My thumb didn't even pause. Block contact. And then silence. The phone in my hand stopped buzzing. The screen went dark. The barrage was over. The silence that filled the room now was different. It wasn't empty or scary. It was calm. It was clean. It felt holy. I placed the phone face down on the table. I didn't need it anymore. There was no one I needed to hear from. The only person who mattered was in the bed in front of me. Tears finally started to stream down my face. But they weren't tears of sadness or anger. They were tears of relief. Of release. I felt like I had been carrying a 100 pounds weight.